So the question comes, is there a set of basic values and principles that humanity share or could share? Is there a set of basic values and principles that we should all aspire for as humanity, that goes beyond our cultural differences, our religious differences, and our national interests? So the invitation here is to really think of a global ethics framework that offers a set of values and principles that go beyond national interests and beyond cultural interests, that brings us together as humanity. And this set of values and principles that should be there to guide us towards a more just, sustainable, and peaceful world. Does that exist? Should we have? I think that's the role that the United Nations has been fulfilling for the past 70 years or so. To find those shared values and principles, because the fact is that humanity lives on one planet with limited resources. And therefore, we require to have a shared values, a shared vision of how we ought to live together on this common planet, common house. So the Earth Charter offers a moral compass for humanity. The Earth Charter is actually the result of a worldwide dialogue, multisectoral, multicultural dialogue, to identify those shared values and principles that humanity share. Not only humanity share as because these are values and principles that we all have, but also values and principles that we should aspire as humanity. So what's the purpose of a compass? A compass basically is a tool, is an instrument to help us identify where we are, our current situation, and where we should go. Give us a sense of direction. So the Earth Charter could be considered as a moral compass for our decisions that are really concerned with the current generations, not only from within our countries, but around the world, and also our concern with future generations. The Earth Charter is the result of this worldwide dialogue that took place during the decade of the 90s. The first idea of an Earth Charter actually emerged from the Brundtland Commission report, Our Common Future, that identified the need of a new charter to guide nations towards sustainable development. The word charter is here as the understanding of the foundation, a map that gives us direction. When we are a captain of a boat, we normally need a charter, a map, again, to help us identify the way, the direction of where we need to go. And a charter is also, the word charter is used as the foundation of an institution. So we would say here is the charter of humanity that transcends our cultural differences and our national borders. The Earth Charter, what's the role of it? It seeks to foster a new consciousness of humanity's shared values and aspirations. What are those minimal values and principles that we all share as humanity? And what are the aspirations where we should go? The Earth Charter offers us an ethical framework, a compass, a moral compass for the necessary global community, and also an instrument for ongoing dialogue across the globe. It seeks to challenge us to link personal ethics and personal interests with collective ethics. It seeks to challenge us to move beyond our national and individual interests, to look at the interest of the common good, which is quite important with an idea of global citizenship. In it, the Earth Charter stresses one of the ideas that the Earth Charter stresses is this one. The importance for us, humanity, human beings from across the globe, to recognize that in the midst of a magnificent diversity of cultures and life forms, we are one human family and one Earth community with a common destiny. So this invitation for us to use the lenses of one human family and the lenses of we belong to an Earth community is an invitation for us to change the way in which we care for one another, not only among human beings, but also Earth living beings. This is an important idea that is articulated inside the Earth Charter preamble. And with this idea, what comes to our mind when we invite us all to think, human family, Earth community, my responsibility and my feeling and my sense of belonging, being part of one human family and one Earth community with a common destiny. What should be my attitude if I start having that vision of my purpose and my place on Earth? So again, what is the Earth Charter? In one hand is a document, is an ethical global framework that has been recognized by UNESCO as an important ethical framework. In 2003, UNESCO adopted a resolution in which they embraced the Earth Charter as an important ethical framework for sustainable development, but also as an important educational instrument for values clarification. As a document, it offers a preamble, 16 principles, and a conclusion. And again, is the result of this worldwide dialogue. The Earth Charter is also a global initiative or a movement that involves individuals, institutions, governments from around the world that have embraced this vision of global ethics that is articulated in the Earth Charter. So it's a global movement that invites institutions and individuals from around the world to embrace this global ethics that emphasizes the vision of one human family, that emphasizes the vision of one Earth community. Something important for us to think. The Earth Charter offers a systemic nature. It has a systemic nature. The 16 principles of the Earth Charter are organized around these 4 parts. But the core of it, the heart of it, is an ethic of care and respect for the community of life. So the first pillar of the Earth Charter is articulated in this way. Respect and care for the community of life should be seen as the foundation for this new global ethic. Should be seen as the heart and the core of this new vision of our role in this planet. If we care and respect for the community of life, it will be easy to address ecological integrity. It will be easy to really implement values and principles of social and economic justice. And also the idea of democracy, non-violence, and peace. Inside each one of these pillars, there are 4 principles and several sub-principles to further clarify the meaning of each one of these dimensions. But the main point here is that even though respect and care for the community of life can be seen as the roots and the foundation of this vision, the world vision that is articulated in the Earth Charter, all of them are interdependent and should be seen with a systemic approach. So let me just highlight some of the core ideas that are inside the Earth Charter, right? Principle 2, or the first part of the Earth Charter, is articulated in this way: respect and care for the community of life. So here, in itself, is an invitation for us to move away from an anthropocentric approach to a life-centered approach. It's not just caring and respect for among us as human beings, or it's not just care and respect for people within my community, within my country, or the global community, which again, it is indeed an invitation for us to expand the circles of care and respect among human beings, but also goes beyond that in the idea of care and respect for life on Earth that goes beyond human beings. So this notion of community of life is very important. And again, it invites what comes to our mind What vision comes to our mind when we think of community of life? What vision comes to our mind of an attitude of respect and care for the community of life? Now, principle 2 says care for the community of life, but with understanding, compassion, and love. It's actually the first time, and I think the only time, that an international declaration and document addresses the word love. Quite interesting. The idea here is that in order to care for someone, to care from someone here on the other side of the world, in order to care for a life, living beings around Earth, we need to understand. Understanding is important. It enlightens in us the sense of awareness, and that awareness comes or invites or emerges a sense of compassion and love. So again, in order to care for the community of life, we need to have a more understanding, even of our interconnections with the community of life. Quite interesting. Another core idea that is articulated in the Earth Charter is this understanding of responsibility, but from a different angle. Is we all have a universal responsibility. We all should share this notion of universal responsibility with the well-being of people, life on Earth, non-human beings, but also future generations. But it's not just about universal responsibility. It's also about we have differentiated responsibility. So this notion is articulated in the preamble and in also one of the principles of the Earth Charter. What comes to our mind with that concept, with that idea? The point here that is trying to articulate is that the more I have, the more capacity I have to address a problem, or the more I was involved in generating a problem. Therefore, the more responsibility we should have to address that problem. So it's common but differentiated responsibility to address a global issue or even a local issue. Okay, so the more information I have, the more capacity I have, or the more involvement I had in generating a problem, therefore the more responsibility we should have to address it. So it's an ethic of care and responsibility for what's going on in the world. The last principle of the Earth Charter has to do with peace. And the reason for that is that in order to ensure enduring peace, we need to ensure ecological integrity, to allow life on Earth. In order to ensure peace, we also need to ensure social and economic justice. So peace is the result of social and economic justice and is the result of ecological integrity. And Principle 16F is articulated in the following way. Recognize that peace is the wholeness created by the right relationships. So the invitation here on global ethics is to find the right relationships with oneself, with ourselves, with other persons, other people, other cultures, other life, Earth, and the large whole of which we are all part. So let's invite ourselves to be creative. Humanity has a huge potential to be creative, to reorient our relationships, to be more harmonious and more caring and respectful, not only with ourselves, but with all these circles. Yeah? So peace is really the result of the right relationships in all these dimensions. That's Principle 16F that is articulated in the Earth Charter. So now the Earth Charter is also an invitation for us even to add to this equation of looking at the interdependence and interconnections of our economic concerns with our social concerns and ecological concerns, but from an ethical perspective. We could even say it requires in order to address these with a different angle, we need to add the ethical and spiritual dimension of sustainability. And that's how we see the vision or the concept of strong sustainability. It's kind of an advanced way to look at sustainable development or sustainability that's life-centered, not anthropocentric, but also adds this notion of spirituality and ethics in order to change our behaviors, our mindsets, and our mental models. So if we look at education, if we look at our processes of teaching and learning around the world, what are the values? What values are underlying and embedded? What are the values that are taught in processes of learning and teaching in our schools and universities? Are these values of collaboration? Are these values that have to do with collaboration, with care and respect? Are these values of responsibility not only with myself, but with my community and the large living world? I would dare to challenge to say that no. Because in terms of humanity history, we could think that there is no other moment in humanity history that people have more access to education. But probably a significant portion of that education that we are having access is actually helping to reinforce a more self-centered approach, more selfish approach, in the sense that we go to acquire education to be in better individual position. Not this idea that we go to seek for education and knowledge in order to contribute to the betterment of society. So I would argue that one of the missing links for the well-being of life on Earth is actually the kind of values that are embedded in our education systems, that are promoting more competition and self-interest or national interest rather than an interest or concern with the common good of our communities and global society. So we should think, what are the values that are taught in the processes of learning and teaching? And what are the values that should be there in order to really expand and deepen this consciousness of a global society that really care for one another? Is the current education system helping to perpetuate the current paradigm of unsustainability? Probably yes. So we need to reorient education to move away from this unsustainability paradigm to a more caring paradigm for life on Earth. I think the United Nations has really understood that. And because of that, there are a number of international policies that have been emerging over the past couple of years to address that. So let's take a look at an international political framework around education as a role, as a driver. Education as a driver, or education in processes of social transformation. So for instance, in 2015, the United Nations launched the SDGs, the new agenda, the UN or the global agenda that should guide us towards a more just and sustainable world towards 2030, the year 2030. There are 17 principles, 17 goals, I would say, 17 sustainable development goals that should guide international cooperation. Goal number 4 has to do with education. Not only education for all, but the kind of education, the kind of values that are embedded in education. So that's one of the political frameworks that are emphasizing the importance of education as a driver for social transformation. The other framework is inside the UNESCO. It's called ESD-GAP, Education for Sustainable Development, Global Action Framework, that was launched at the end of 2014. At the end, or as a follow-up, I would say, of the United Nations Decade, on Education for Sustainable Development, which was already an initiative, a UN initiative that ran between 2005 and 2014 to promote education for sustainable development. So the GAP, now it's a permanent program, UNESCO program to promote ESD. The World Education Forum took place in May 2015 in Korea and issued an important declaration also to guide ministries of education from around the globe on what should be the priorities to reorient education, again, as a driver for social transformation. Article 6 of the Climate Change Convention has to do with education. So again, it's a UN instrument on climate change that looks at the importance of education as a main driver to help address climate change, so climate change education. The 10YFP is an agenda in UNEP, the United Nations Environmental Program, has issued a 10-year framework